Hello, everybody. It's Sarah Black Spiker here, and I'm so thrilled for the conversation that we're about to have with Justin Brown. Justin, how are you?
Doing great, sir. And yourself?
I am fantastic. I'm excited to talk to you today because we're going to cover not only your career as a football player, but your transition and the work that you're doing now to help athletes who are following their calling and, in many ways, footsteps that you have created in ways that is really needed nowadays. And I can't wait for us to really dive into all of the goodness.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So let's start with your story. For those of you who in the audience who are not familiar with Justin, your resume is impressive from football player, college football player to professional football player in NFL. You also had a career in Canada, and then you had to overcome such a adversity to really find yourself again. And now you are also a published author, and you have created your own framework of, I think it's Dive framework. I can't wait
Yep.
to dive into that one. Uh, really helping individuals find their own strengths and find their own calling and really put the best foot forward, not just in sports, but also in life. So, can you take us back to did you always know that football is going to be your career, or how did that happen?
Yeah, that's great. So I grew up, right, just like a lot of other athletes, really just having that identity as being an athlete, right? So being super active and every single season playing a sport, I didn't necessarily know that football was going to be um, the avenue that I was, or the vehicle, right? As I say, the vehicle that was going to kind of take me to the next level until around my sophomore year, right? So I played all three sports up until my sophomore year. After my fall of my sophomore year, I got my first offer from the University of Maryland, and then at the same time, then I also failed off the basketball team because my grades just weren't up to par. Right, I had a 1.8 GPA at the end of my sophomore or at the end of my fall. So getting pulled off the basketball team, really having to buckle down on my grades. I started to kind of just narrow down on the football. I was still playing baseball at the time as well. But then after, when I got into my junior year, I started to then do junior day visits, and I'm getting, invited to a lot of different colleges across the country. So that kind of conflicted with the schedule. And so I kind of had to just, pull away from baseball as well. So I did end up running track my senior year, but I didn't necessarily want to do that in college. Just kind of wanted to just stay in shape and keep my speed right. So it kind of, football just was the path that kind of chose me. As I say, like I said, I was very active. I loved playing baseball, but it was a situation to where I was getting offers in football, right? So I had to kind of go where they were going to be paying for school, and that's what my parents were saying. So that's kind of how I ended up choosing football. But I'm like, I always loved playing football. One of the early memories that I had about just choosing to play football was I used to do karate as well. So I was trying to do everything at like 5, 6 years old, and it was like, all right, you have to do either football or karate. And I was like, man, I really like karate, but it was like, you know what, I got to just stick with football. So, and ever since I've always kind of had football. I've always stayed with football even to this day, right? So that's kind of how I chose football.
It's so funny because when I was in first grade, I started karate too, and I was so shy. I was so timid. I was like, "This is not for me. Get me out of here." And then I ended up in basketball. But I love the something that you mentioned, the notion also with your parents, go with what's gonna pay for your school.
Hmm.
And I've been noticing conversation going on as of recently in our industry, the impact of competitive sports at young age and the pressure that young athletes are carrying, knowing that the rest of their life literally depends on their ability to perform at the level that they can be offered a scholarship. Otherwise, they don't have a shot at a high education. um, Now, I was born and raised in Europe. I did not have that pressure, so it was really love for the sports. That was all there was.
Yeah.
um, how did you handle that, or was that even something that you had on the back of your mind, that kind of
Um, yeah. I mean, I didn't necessarily. I did see it as pressure once my sophomore year came around, and I realized that, and coaches were coming in saying, "Hey, we have this offer, but you have to be able to qualify, right?" And that's what I tell kids all the time. I really, I don't know how my life would have turned out if I didn't qualify and end up going straight to, a major Division 1, right? I wasn't, I don't know how it would have turned out if I would stayed locally or if I had to go do a year at JUCO or a year at prep. So there was pressure on that aspect at a young age in high school of having to really make sure that I was um, handling my responsibilities as a student first, continuing and continue to produce and go out to camps and compete and get invited to these high level camps where it's all the top athletes in that area or in the country, and it's only 100 of them, and you have to compete, right? So just having that type of a schedule at a young age, I didn't necessarily see it as pressure because at the same time, I mean, the academic piece was definitely pressure because I wasn't the smartest person in the room all the time, right? But as far as athletically, I always felt as though I could hold my own, with people at the high school level, wherever I went, right? So as far as pressure in competing, I didn't really feel that pressure, especially with where I was getting trained. I was getting trained by some people that were very, very in tune with what to do and how to train athletes at the high school level to get them to not only the collegiate level, but to the professional level, right? So people that I trained with in high school in a small little Wilmington, Delaware, out of like about 10 of us, 6 or 7 of us all went to the NFL, right? So just being in that environment, you can imagine how competitive it just was to be in that environment. People all from the same state, pretty much the same region. We're competing against each other during the season, but then we're going out 4 to 5 days throughout the week, shoot 6 days throughout the week. We're going and competing against each other in the weight room, on the field. Even when it came to study halls and certain things like that, and who can have higher GPAs because we all were kind of in the same situation.
Mhm.
So that kind of alleviated the pressure as far as competing athletically, and it helped me jumpstart as far as my work ethic and my mindset that separated me once I got into the Division 1 level from the other people that I came in with. So just having that, I think that foundation, having that support structure, and that's why I really believe in making sure that you're surrounding yourself in communities, right, that are going to get you prepared for that type of pressure, or get you prepared for that transition, or get you prepared for that mindset of being an athlete at a high level. Because today, I mean, in today's world, I mean, social media was out, but it wasn't out as much as we had like MySpace, right? Facebook was just becoming a thing. I think something was called like Xanga or something like that. So it wasn't as um, people weren't really necessarily on social media as they are today. So the pressures that come with that and comparing yourself and seeing someone else get an offer and you're trying to compare yourself to this person in the next state, next country, right? Like that's a whole different um, type of pressure, right? And that can lead into the anxiety and leads into the depression. I just saw, matter of fact, someone that does blogs on, and he was talking about how um, just how student athletes nowadays are training at a high level all year round and how that leads into anxiety and depression. So it's really, I think it's bigger now than it's ever been, especially since I was coming up. But kind of getting back to your question, I did feel pressure academically. I always kind of felt pressure academically in high school. It got better when I got to college and I had all the support system and all the tutors. And I was a kid that was sitting in the front of the row in every single class and raising my hand, even if I didn't know the answer, because I wanted to build that rapport with the professor and show them that I care. So it got better after high school, but it was definitely pressure academically to get out of that situation.
Oh, there's so many different ways we can take this conversation
Yeah.
too. I know for sure we're going to come back to the social media piece, but let's for now just to establish the big picture. After high school, you sign up with Penn State,
Mhm.
and then you went to Oklahoma. And how was your college experience?
Oh man, college experience. It was, I mean, Penn State was, it's one of the top, programs in the country, right? One of the top schools in the country, over 55,000 students, great campus. It's in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, right? So it's Happy Valley. It's, everybody's friendly. You can leave your door unlocked, right? So as far as the culture, it was definitely, it was a little bit different from where I came from, but it was still welcoming, right? It was a different, as far as a different culture, but still welcoming. It was a great campus. But as far as the football aspect, it was traditional, right? There was a lot of great people that came through Penn State before I did. And so, and again, it was one of those well-known, household name schools. But as far as the football aspect, me transitioning from Penn State to Oklahoma, it just didn't pan out athletically as I thought it would. Certain things that maybe were said in recruiting didn't end up panning out. But I wasn't the kid that kind of as soon as hit some adversity, jump up and try to transfer, right? So I stuck it out my first year. I then had a conversation that next spring with Coach Turno at the time, and was just kind of like saying, hey, I don't think it's working out, but he wouldn't let me transfer. So that's when I started really seeing the business aspect of, college football. And it's like, once you sign that dotted line, you can't, it's not as easy to get out of those situations as people may think. Right. So that's when I first saw the business of college football. And, once unfortunately there was a scandal that hit. Like I said, I was never someone that was trying to get the attention. I did my job. I was great in my academics, thankfully, way better than high school. I didn't get in any problems off the field. And I mean, I was able to start my sophomore year, start my junior year, but unfortunately, athletically, it just wasn't kind of adding up to what I was promised, right? And what the work I thought I was putting in. And, the opportunities weren't there. So unfortunately, there was a scandal that hit, well-known scandal. And, people were, a lot of people, innocent lives were involved. And it did create an opportunity for people to, transfer if they wanted to transfer and go to another school. I wasn't the type of student, I wasn't the type of kid to transfer to a school that was in conference. So I wanted to, and I got the blessing of my teammates before I even transferred, right? They understood my situation. They understood how hard I worked. They understood, the fact that our offense wasn't just putting up numbers. So they kind of gave me their blessing. I spoke to the people that I came in my recruiting class because I felt like as I owed that to them as being one of their brothers, right? And then I transferred to Oklahoma, right? Middle of their training camp. Oh man, completely different part of the country, right? Midwest, never been to the Midwest in my life. It's flat, it's hot. But again, good people, right? In the city of Norman, Oklahoma City, good people down there. They really were welcoming. The team was welcoming. The coaching staff was welcoming. And it was a great experience. I ended up I had to go through a little bit of I had some adversity, right? I just being in a new team, understanding that I only had 6 months to do pretty much outproduce what I did in the 3 years at Penn State. And, I had to, sleeping in the locker room for about 2 weeks and just really just immersing myself into that system and watching film and getting treatment and, 24/7, right? Like I didn't even go to the dorm rooms or to the, houses yet because I didn't even have one. So I was just sleeping in the locker room, just trying to be able to do what I had to do to continue my dreams and continue the pathway that I had started. So fortunately enough, at the end of that season, I ended up tripling my stats or doubling my stats in just 6 months than I did at 3 years at Penn State. So it created an opportunity for me to get drafted. I played with some phenomenal athletes down at Oklahoma. I think everyone that was on our offense that started ended up going to the NFL. We also had a lot of people on the defensive side that went to go to the NFL. So that was just eye opening. I had a really, firsthand experience of what happens when you get your opportunity. And had other firsthand experience about the business of college football. They treated it business like. The Coach Stoops was a phenomenal coach. Coach Norvell, who's a head coach now, he was my position coach. Phenomenal coach, very great in supporting. And like I said, the team was welcoming, and they treated me as if I was there for 3 years. So I was really thankful for. I'm always indebted for University of Oklahoma for how they treated me and the opportunity that it presented for me to get drafted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the Penn State scandal. Yes, it was all over the news and
Yes.
it was so divisive of, my husband being a huge fan,
Mm,
also born and raised in Pennsylvania,
mm,
and his whole family, you have a whiteout event, they're there. And it was really heart-wrenching seeing the audience trying to reconcile much. I mean, I can, as a spectator, as a former athlete, I can't even imagine what happens to an athlete when everything just turns to dust and all of a sudden all your records are gone and everything that the athletes have put so much work into and so much sacrifice is just
yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
Um, so I appreciate you addressing that. Is there anything, what were some of the lessons that you have learned from that experience, if any, if you're even willing to talk about it?
Yeah. As far as lessons, honestly, just seeing how quick things can change. Um, and just seeing, as far as, leadership, right? Like I said, even with that situation, regardless of, who believes was at fault, right? I don't want to necessarily get into that. But, actions and decisions and, how it starts at the top, right? The few decisions of a few men or a few people could really affect and impact the lives of so many, right? Like you said, there was so many. Penn State has always had a big following. So not only, let's put that aside, right? The victims, right? Their lives have been affected, right? Their families' lives were been affected. They had to kind of relive those moments again. And then you go break it down to, the campus, right? People would have never, people never would have thought about that, right? Talking about that, that in that area about tradition and honor and things of that nature. And then going back to the team, and the team was shocked, right? Like the team, we didn't know what was going on. Nobody even that played knew, right? The unfortunate. I mean, I probably saw the guy maybe twice in my 4 years, right? He was so I mean, he wasn't necessarily a coach on the team at the time, right? He was a coach that had coached a long time ago. He was just in the area, but that doesn't make it any better, right? So it was just an unfortunate situation, and just to see how quick, um, how quick it happened. Like I can still remember Joe's last, his last speech, what he wore, what he said. Um, it was difficult, right? Because that was the last time I saw him in that last speech, and then shortly after, he passed, right? So just seeing a lot of the media, just really, and I was in media studies at the time, so just seeing a lot of the how the media and how narratives can get pitched, and now it was a little bit of a circus, but at the end of the day, there was a lot of different families that were affected, well before that situation happened, and then of course, then you lead out to the fans and supporters. It's like it went through the whole country, probably the whole world, with as far as the support that Penn State has. And I mean, they've done a great job of trying to, rebuild as far as athletically. But I think that's always going to kind of be a stain on that program for sure.
That brings back so many memories. And I think in sports in general, there's this dichotomy of loyalty to the team and reputation of an institution,
Mhm.
and then being somebody who has been so incredibly negatively infected as an individual. How do you rise to the system? And we see it not just in sports, we see it right now with social movements,
Mhm.
with the fights for equality. Some I forgot who he was who raised a question, where are the good people who are going to stand up against the system? Because we
Yeah.
need to change the system in so many different levels. And to
Yeah.
piggyback the conversation now on the social media from the perspective of, yes, it used to be you were an athlete, the game was over, you came home to a private life, no one knew you. Then all of a sudden with the social media, you're all over the place 24/7. And then with the endorsement deals and just the responsibility that's on your shoulders
Mhm.
is getting so much more complex than it used to be.
Yeah.
Um, so, have you experienced that aspect with the NFL, and how were you prepared to handle that?
Yeah, that's a great topic. One thing when I reflect back on it now, that I definitely try to share with athletes, even at the high school level, is understanding like your brand, right? That's because me, I was really just a straight edge, straight and narrow. Hey, let me just go to my job and do what I need to do. Right. I wasn't necessarily the one that was going to turn the phone on in the locker room, and have a live or have my own YouTube channel, right? If that was out. I was just really so focused on just honestly staying out of the staying out of the headlights, and just making sure that I can produce, right? But then understanding literally, as I was even in the NFL, and how much opportunities and how you can leverage that, to get endorsements or to create other opportunities or to create foundations and start social movements that are dear to you. That's something that I wasn't necessarily. Well, for one, it wasn't something that was being pushed, especially at the collegiate level, right?
Yeah.
Because they weren't trying to pay athletes off brand
Yes.
likeness and brand, right? They weren't trying to do that at all. They're just starting to talk about some of that stuff in the past couple of years. So they weren't preaching that, but there were still ways if we were, again, if we knew better, right, we would have been able to capitalize on that. So I do believe that it can create. Going back to the whole mental piece, right? It could create some anxiety, it could create social pressures. But if you have a great team, and if you understand who you are, right, and understand, okay, this is the social movement at an early age, right? Understanding certain things that might be dear to you, or certain causes that might have affected you or your family, your community, so that when you do get on that platform, you can understand and have a team that says, hey, this is the cause that I want to start, to start to support, right, at the collegiate level, so that that brand kind of carries over. And as you continue to build your brand, right, whether it's posting on social media weekly, talking about those causes that are dear to you, it's going to open up opportunities for if not only if you go to the NFL, but even when you go out into the real world, right? Say if your transition is done after college, people are going to be able to look at your social media, because that's what they do when they interview you. They check your social media out, so they can be able to look at your social media and still be able to see, okay, this is what this athlete is about off the field, court or ice. So he would be a great representation of our company, right? So again, I think it's a great tool, but I do definitely believe you need to know exactly what you're trying to do and put out there, because you don't want to be putting out, certain things that might not represent you the best, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want to look 5 years down the line and say, wow, I might have just messed up a lot of opportunities, outside of football because of what I was posting, and I didn't have a strategy, and I didn't have a team, and I didn't have any guidance. So I believe, athletes getting paid off their likeness, I am all for it, right? I'm all for it, because other people are getting paid off our likeness and our brand, right? A lot of billions, millions of dollars, right? So it's like, I understand, athletes, we get a free education, but they're just not getting a free education for their kids because we won a game. No, they're actually getting millions of dollars because we won that game, right? So if it's like, you don't pay the athletes pennies when you guys are getting millions. But I honestly, I do believe that's because of social media, because of likeness and brandness, and it's going to open up a lot of doors. It's going to, of course, create some challenges, but I'm all for it, as long as the athletes are kind of having a strategy and a plan, so that they can be, making sure that they're going down the right direction as they do that.
Definitely. Oh, that's a whole different conversation that we can have, because it's such a new idea. It's a really complex and multi-layered approach that will need to happen to make it, like you said, done right.
Right.
But for a moment, let's go to, my dogs are barking.
That's
Oh,
why.
what's going on outside? um, let's go to the draft, NFL draft. There you are. To some individuals, I would dare to say one of the biggest events of their lives.
Yes.
For some, it might be the ultimate dream come true.
Yes.
What was your experience with it, and what was the moment when you were actually drafted? What went through you?
So it was a unique experience, I'll say that. So pre-draft, right after the bowl game, I'm getting ready for pre-draft. I didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl. I didn't get invited to the East-West Shrine game, which are two celebrated games for seniors that are going to the next level. But I did get invited to like some sort of a Senior Bowl, and things I called Texas versus the Nation. And so I was able to kind of be able to go out there and practice and be in front of scouts. So it was a great opportunity. After that, I didn't get invited to the combine, which a lot of agents were really trying to get connected with me because they thought I was going to get invited because of my production at OU. And after I didn't get invited, all the agents drop off, right? So that's when I really started seeing the business. Like, okay, well, they're only you're only as valuable as what what they think you're worth. So it really allowed me to just humble myself and continue to put my head down. There were some challenging moments, going through that time as I kind of reflect on it, where I was kind of doubted, like, man, what was going to happen next? I'm not really getting invited. I did sign with an agent, but the individual wasn't that experienced. So I mean, it was challenging, not understanding, hey, am I going to still get drafted? Am I going to be free agent? Am I going to go to Canada? So just dealing with that uncertainty. And at the time, I wasn't necessarily as self-aware as I am now, right? So I didn't necessarily kind of know how to balance that. So it could be a very stressful time for a lot of athletes, that draft process. And I can remember being out and training in locally in Philadelphia area, and being in my studio and really just during the day of the draft, just getting away. Like, I didn't even watch the draft the first 2 days. And then the third day, I didn't watch the draft, and I went and just, got something to eat, came back. And I remember watching a little bit, turned it off. And of course, I'm going all through different types of emotions. And it's just me in my studio, me and my girlfriend at the time in my studio. And, I remember just getting a call, from the Cowboys, and the Cowboys were like, hey, hey, we're thinking about signing you in free agency. And I'm like, all right, well, hey, at least the Cowboys reached out, they'll sign me free agency, nice. I'm fortunate, I'm grateful. And then shortly after that, I see the Steelers call, right? And they said, hey, did Dallas call you? And I was like, yeah, they're planning to sign me. They were like, okay, hold on the phone, we're about to draft you. And I'm like, perfect. And I'm just like, okay, is this about to happen? And so I turned the TV on, and sure enough, as soon as I turned the TV on to the draft, I get on the phone with Mike Tomlin. He's like, hey, Justin, congratulations. We're about to draft you. We're excited. Then I go, I speak to the Rooney family. I speak to offensive coordinator, and then I see my name come up on the screen. And I'm like, and then as my name comes up, then my phone starts blowing up from text messages, and I'm still on the phone. I'm just like, yo, this is really happening. So it was just a very, very, very thankful moment. I feel very blessed and fortunate for that moment to happen the way it did, because honestly, it just kind of shows just having faith, right? Just from my career path and going to Penn State and not necessarily having the card line up, and then having to make a real tough decision through a difficult time. A lot of adversity, a lot of conflict, and then, sticking it out and going to a different place and sleeping in the locker room for 2 weeks, and just trying all to get to that moment. And then even the moments before that, and the people that sacrificed, and helped me out. Like I said, the community that worked and that was working with me at the high school level, my parents, of course, right? Because they, hours of practice and traveling and, speaking with coaches and going to school. So everything just came to, it just came to a point, right? And so I was just excited. I had a small little, get together with my family locally, and we celebrated. And then it was, and that next week I had to go report to Steelers and get back to work. So it was a great time. I think it's something I always hold on to, as far as a testament to just having faith and believing in God, and no matter how dim it looks, or no matter your path, it just, I always go back to that moment, like where I felt as though nobody really thought I was gonna get drafted, had to go through that route, and God was still showing favor. So that's something that I always go back to, even as I go throughout different challenges in life right now.
Yeah. It just goes to show what it's meant to be. It's going to happen regardless. And sometimes the obstacles that are coming to cross our path, the way I see it, oftentimes is simply to test our commitment to our vision,
Yeah.
as opposed to as a deterrent to, oh yeah, see, I was right. It's not meant to be.
Right.
Here's an adversity. My own story is very familiar with overseas, when all of a sudden I got an email, hey, would you like to come play for us? We're here in New York. I was like, no. But then eventually I was like, okay, fine, I can go give it a try. But it was this disconnect from the outcome in a way. I didn't even process at the time, what does it mean to be offered Division I scholarship, much less somebody who has had no aspiration whatsoever to ever play at that level. But then, of course, the process, okay, now this is what we need from you. This is what needs to happen. And every single step fell sideways.
Mm.
The point I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. But it did. So speaking of adversities and things going sideways, we spoke in one of the conversations before this interview about your professional career ending not necessarily how you would want it to.
Right.
So how did that impact you?
Oh man, it was challenging, right? So after my first year, I was on practice squad, and then my second year, I made active roster, and literally going into my second year, I had a conversation with Antonio Brown, right? So well-known wide receiver at the time. It was between him and Julio Jones, to be one of the best wide receivers in the game, right? So training with him that summer, firsthand seeing how his work ethic, right? Seeing how he was, how he treated, with his family, just how he was off of the field. And then I'll never forget, Sarah, going after one of our hardest workout sessions, right, of the day before, and I get peeled off of the turf because I'm just passed out from pushing the sled the width of the football field like 6 or 7 times, stacked with like 7 45-pound plates, running 7 200-meter sprints, running bleachers, catching the ball over 200 times. Like, I'm completely spent. And we get back to his house. His chef is preparing a meal, and we're just having a conversation, chopping it up. And he just asked me, he said, so JB, he says, who are you? And I'm like, wait a second, we play on the same team. We're in the NFL. We're football players. Like, I'm a football player. He was just like, no, don't say that again. Like, don't let this game do that to you. Like, you're more than an athlete. And that was the first time, Sarah, that I really thought about, like, okay, maybe I need to start thinking about like things outside of the game. Because I don't, at the time, I didn't have too many hobbies, right? Like, everybody knew me as being football. Like, I'm football, focused on football. Like, I stay out of trouble just to kind of make sure that I can be able to still play football, take care of my body so I can play football. You know what I mean? So it was always sports, it was always football driven. Like you were talking about it in the beginning of the segment. And that was the first time that that was challenged. And then it was challenged to me by one of the best players in the game at the time. So that's what had me like, okay, I really need to give this some thought, because if he's thinking like this, then I definitely should be thinking more like this. Then shortly after that, Sarah, going into that season, I had gotten released right before the playoffs. I had gotten released, and then I was picked up by the Bills. So going into that training camp the next year, second week of training camp, I had ended up breaking my foot. Right, I was playing on a broken foot the entire training camp. Didn't even know. My last play was like a 70-yard touchdown in the scrimmage, right, from Matt Castle, and and then I'll never forget. Like, that was my last play. I go into the locker room. They're saying I get the MRI, and the next day I go back into the facility, and I don't see my helmet there, right? And that's usually when your helmet's not there, that means you're about to get cut. So I'm really freaking out. I go back into the like the training room to where, the trainers are, and I see all the doctors in the back room, and they're like, hey, you got to come back here. So then they have my x-ray up, and they're like you, and honestly, when I go into that room, it's like everything went silent. I couldn't even hear anything because I already knew what was going to happen. And I see my x-ray, I see the pinky toe, and they're saying that, hey, this is a crack, you got to get surgery. And I'm like, okay, great, now I'm out for 7-8 weeks, right? So I get, I have a settlement with them. And I go out to Vegas to kind of start doing rehab. And at the time, I was getting a lot more time with my daughter as well. And shortly after that, I'm rehabbing out in Vegas, and just rehabbing my foot. It's getting a little bit better. I'm rehabbing, and I'm training with some of the athletes at UNLV, some of the football players at UNLV, and doing one-on-one drills. I'm just doing a route, and it felt like a sword had just cut me across my thigh. So then I had torn my quad, right? So now that was 2 season-ending injuries. Now I'm out 2 years, and NFL stands for not for long anyway. So now I'm trying to rehab that quad, and my foot was about 70-80% at the time. Like, I could still run on it, and I get an opportunity to go play in Canada, right? So now it's coming up on my 3rd season, and second week in the training camp, I end up tearing my psoas, right? So 3 season-ending injuries all on the right side of my body, and now I'm back home, right? I'm on the couch, depression, anxiety, right? The fear of the unknown, right? Creating that anxiety, it's really what I had to go through. And now all I can think about, right, is that who are you? Who are you? And then what really got to me, Sarah, was the fact that I could no longer even say I was a football player anymore. Right. So everything that I put so much weight into as far as my identity, and this is my vehicle, this is going to allow me to, create a living, create a lifestyle, and help my family, help my causes. And that's all. And it slowly got taken away year after year after year, 3 years in a row. So I had to really go through my go-through moment. I mean, I really was struggling, trying to figure out what was going to be next. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up taking a assistant coaching position, not even assistant coaching. Like, I was just going around helping out when I, outside of rehabbing my body. And that led into me taking up a substitute teaching position. So that it really gave me something to do outside of rehabbing. I didn't tell anybody that I was a former athlete. It was in a different part of my state. So people, if you didn't necessarily know who I was, and which was a very few people at that school, then you wouldn't have, and if I wouldn't have said anything, then, people wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
But it really allowed me to get outside of myself and really start to care about, the youth in the community. And I started to see the hopelessness, right? People saying, hey, I can't make it to the NFL. And I'm like, yes, you can. I made it to the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, you can make it to the NFL. You can do, you can, go after your goals and dreams. And even if it was like them seeing me reading a book, right? And, maybe the most challenging student in that school, they see me reading a book, and they're like, oh, this is a former NFL player. What are you reading? Oh, this is about investments. Oh, this is about, personal development. This is about your mindset. This is about time management. So it opens their mind up to, okay, this guy made it to this level, and he's reading these type of books. Maybe I need to change up something about myself personally, right? So I started to really see how just the weight of being a former professional athlete, right? And me just thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, right? Because I came from that, and like where everybody's an athlete, and then seeing how that can be viewed in the community and how it can help the youth. That's what led me to really start to mentor. I was already training some wide receivers at the time. And then, just being challenged by a local mentor at a local restaurant who challenged me to use the same, skills, the same qualities that I used in the professional level, that got me to the professional level, and just translate that into anything that I wanted to do today. That's pretty much what he challenged me on. So as I started to go through that and continue to pour into the lives of the high school students at the time, and then I transferred and I went to a private elementary school and taught 4th grade, which I realized that's the lowest level I would teach. But it was a great experience, right? It was a great culture, great experience, and it really just allowed me to have, as far as presenting and as far as lesson planning, it was a lot of different qualities that I learned in being an educator that I even take to what I do today. So that led into me becoming, going out and speaking, which about like we spoke about earlier, right? The dive principles, understanding and defining who you are, not just as an athlete, but as a person, investing into yourself in the all different types of facets, whether it's personally, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, academically, surrounding yourself surrounding yourself with people that are going to be able to add value to you, right? So that you can become valuable and add value to others with your gifts, with your strengths, with your talents, right? With your celebrity or your status. And then making sure that you execute, right? Whatever goals, dreams that you have, making sure you're putting systems or people in place to allow you to execute. So that's pretty much my signature, my keynote speech, one of my speeches, and also being able to deliver the message through a book. It's really been beneficial. Honestly, been beneficial for a lot of the student athletes, a lot of the coaches I've been able to speak to, especially during this time, right, of COVID. Really just speaking into, because this is the first time that for a lot of people sports stop. So my message was, hey, this is not going to be the last time that sports stop, and you need to be prepared, right? You need to really be prepared for that transition when it comes, because it's not a matter of if, but it's about when.
Yeah. Oh, I know we are coming up to our time's up. But I would love to continue this conversation at another opportunity because there's just so much more to unpack. Simply when it comes to transitioning for so many athletes, just like what you experienced,
Mhm.
total loss of identity, having to figure out who you are, having to figure out all the pieces that, when you have this singular focus on sport, nothing else even flies through your radar that is so essential to make it, you know um living. Then you have to go back and learn the pieces, the ABCs, in a
Yeah,
whole different way.
yeah,
So that conversation in itself can be a whole new hour.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We could definitely dive back into that whenever. I mean, like you said, that because, and we were just talking about it earlier, but it's super hard to being a high school athlete, and again, you're trying to compete, you're competing all year round, or you're playing sports all year round, and then you also have to focus on, you know not life after your sport, but what qualities, right? Again, we kind of talk about personalities and assessments and stuff, but what qualities can best translate or transition you into not only the career, but a positions, just so you can have that thought, right? Like, okay, okay, I do like to kind of really be analytical. I do like, really being a stickler with time and stuff. So maybe I might want to be someone that's a programmer, right? Or someone that, is a programmer or an accountant, someone that likes numbers, someone that really likes the finite details. Or, hey, I was a person that was an athlete that was always getting the team riled up. I'm cracking jokes during stretch, right? People can't tell me to stop talking. Well, you can be a speaker, right? You can be a presenter, you can marketing, right? Sales, right? So there's different areas where you can go. And a lot of times athletes don't understand that the same qualities and strengths that they allowed them to get to that level, whether it was, physically, your work ethic, or just how you were in the locker room, right? Being a great teammate, galvanizing the team, being motivational, being a great leader, being a great supporter, right? Being someone that was going to being consistent. These are all same qualities that, high level executives look for, right? And a lot of high level executives, they possess. So you don't just get to that level without becoming great at those traits. And those traits are transferable into corporate, right? Into being an entrepreneur. And a lot of times athletes, we don't make that connection because not a lot of people are telling us that we can make that connection as we're transitioning. So we can definitely dive into that at another day, for sure. But it's a lot of great conversation for that.
Absolutely. Oh, so for now, where can members of the audience find you? How can they get in touch with you, hold of your book, or even if they want to dive deeper into working with you?
Absolutely. So you can definitely reach me at my website, www.justinbrownbs.com. I'm also on LinkedIn at Justin Brown, Facebook at Justin Brown, and Instagram. My Instagram and Twitter handle is Justin Brown _VS. So that's the way that you can get in contact with me. We are, definitely still doing speaking engagements. Definitely still doing trainings with the assessment that we could talk about another time. But yeah, that's what pretty much my plight is, right? Really helping athletes understand who they are outside of the field, court, or ice, just so they can be better in the transition, and then can, not necessarily avoid going through the transition moment, because it is going to be a transition, but just trying to lessen the curve, right? Instead of it being, 2, 3 years, 4 or 5 years. And even some athletes today, they're going through transition and going through transitioning through jobs and not understanding where they're going to fit in. At least make it a couple of months, right? Make it a year, max 2 years, because as you're going through that process, you're going through the trainings, you have the support, right? You have people that have gone through the same process and that can train you, going off the same skills that you already possess, and get you to that area where it's going to be something that fits closer to, who you are naturally, and get you back into that environment to where, you can feel more like a team. So I think that's one of the main things that athletes miss. That's that locker room, that camaraderie. And, depending on how, your qualities in different positions, you can find that same type of setting and bring that same type of those characteristics to whatever setting you go to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for today. Wish you nothing but the best and looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm looking forward to the next one too. You take it easy.
Yeah.